This episode is brought to you by Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, arriving in theaters June 30th. In this franchise's final installment, the most iconic adventurer of all time comes out of retirement to search for a legendary device with the power to change history. Harrison Ford returns alongside Phoebe Waller-Bridge and Mads Mikkelsen. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny opens June 30th, only in theaters. Tickets are on sale now.
Empire.
Welcome to Inside the Cap. I'm your host, Joel Corey. You can find me on Twitter at CoreyJoel. That's CorryJoel. You can also read my regular CBSSports.com column, Agents Take on NFL Salary Cap and Contract Matters. Today we're going to take a look at the DeAndre Hopkins situation. On Friday, we got some pre-Memorial Day news. The Arizona Cardinals announced that they were releasing DeAndre Hopkins. Hopkins did not have a $30.75 million cap number. He did prior to his 6-game suspension for violating the performance-enhancing substances policy, but the Cardinals did get a slight cap credit this year to bring the bonus proration down on the roster bonus that was converted into signing bonus and prorated last year. So his cap number this year is actually $29,988,890. Now, the cap credit, from my understanding, also extended to the proration next year. So since this release is occurring before June 2nd, when the proration from future years will not hit the cap this year, everything from proration from 2024 is going to hit the cap in 2023. And there is a signing bonus, option bonus, and then the restructure with the roster bonus. So that's the way I have it. Is the dead money is going to be $21,077,776, which would be, instead of an $8.15 million cap savings, which it would have been without any suspension, it's going to be an $8,911,114 cap savings that the Cardinals are going to get this year. Hopkins was scheduled to make $19.45 million this year and had a $14.915 million salary in 2024 for a total of $34.365 million. Why weren't the Cardinals able to trade DeAndre Hopkins? First off, the Cardinals' initial asking price was reportedly a second-round pick. And that was not unreasonable to ask for in a trade, given what happened in 2021, that Julio Jones was acquired after June 1st. So the Titans acquired him from the Atlanta Falcons, so the Falcons could take the proration over 2 years. The trade compensation for that was Jones and a 2023 sixth-round pick went to the Titans, and the Falcons got back a 2022 second-round pick and a 2023 fourth-round pick. So asking for a second-round pick for DeAndre Hopkins, who in 9 games last year had 64 catches, 717 yards, and 3 touchdowns, was not going to be unreasonable. First trade we saw for wide receiver this year was Brandon Cooks, and that kind of reshaped what a team should expect to give up, because Brandon Cooks, who turns 30 in September, Hopkins turns 31 on June 6th, went to Dallas from Houston for a 2023 fifth and a 2024 sixth-round pick. Far cry from second-round pick that the Arizona Cardinals supposedly wanted. Cooks was supposed to make $18.5 million this year and $16.5 million next year, $35 million. He had 57 catches for 699 yards and 3 touchdowns in 13 games last year. Now, prior to the trade, the Texans ate $6 million of salary. They converted $6 million into signing bonus to reduce the amount of money that the Cowboys are having to take on this year. And then there was a subsequent restructure after he was acquired. So this year, Cooks, instead of making 18.5, was going to make 18. And he ended up reducing his $16.5 million salary to $8 next year. So it's going to be $26 million over 2 years. And then there was another conversion by Dallas where they took $8 million and converted into signing bonus, added 2 voiding dummy years to stretch out the proration over 4 years. Then about a week before the draft, maybe close to 10 days, you had another trade which was basically a salary dump, and the Rams getting rid of Allen Robinson that just didn't pan out in the 1 year he was with the Rams. He hasn't been productive since 2020 over the 2021 and 2022 seasons. Last year in Chicago plus his first year in LA, 71 catches, 749 yards, 4 touchdowns in 2022. 33 catches, 339 yards, 3 TDs. That was 10 games. He had an $18.05 million cap hit with the Rams. Now, there's a $5.525 million fifth-day league year roster bonus the Rams already paid. Robinson was going to make $15.25 million this year. They ate $5 million more on the way out the door, converted $5 million of salary. So they're eating $10.25 million in cash to get rid of Allen Robinson. He's still going to make the $15.25 million this year because he's making the $5 million from Pittsburgh. They did a salary conversion as well, and he chopped down his $15.75 million salary for 2024. He's originally scheduled to make $31 million over those 2 years. Now he's going to make $7.5 in 2024, but he's making $15.25 this year. You got 2 teams eating salary to facilitate a trade. Apparently, cap room was more important to the Cardinals than anything else, because you got one team eating 6 in Dallas, another eating 10.25 in the Rams. And in the Rams' case, they ended up having their cap charges for Robinson increased by $3.4 million. $18.05 million cap hit, now $21.45 million in dead money. Now, Arizona is picking up $8.9 million of cap room by cutting Hopkins. What I was saying is, if they were going to eat $5 million, $6 million of salary, then that was going to cut into cap saves if they found a suitor. And also, you need to have someone, if you cut that, that's willing to pay him similar to what these 2 guys are getting. He's supposed to make $19.45 million. You had 18 that Cooks is making, 15.25 that Robinson is making. So if you ate 5, Hopkins would have had $14.45 million left. Obviously, that didn't happen. The 2 teams that had the most interest were, according to Albert Greer of SI, the Bills and the Chiefs. But there's no way they're going to be able to fit that type of cap hit in, even if there's a significant amount of money of salary eaten, because you have to have enough money to absorb the remaining part of player's contract in a trade. So them even taking on at the time $10 million would have been damn near impossible. So there are a lot of logistical problems to the trade. So Arizona just decided, you know what, we're going to have a clean cap in 2024, get them off the books this year, take our 8-9 in cap space, move on. There's criticism because you weren't able to get anything for Hopkins this year, not even a late round pick. Saw that the Rams moved up 17 spots in the draft in a fire sale. Allen Robinson didn't get that. That was their choice. They couldn't have used the post U1 designation. Each team has 2 post U1 designations. Arizona used them this league year on J.J. Watt, who is retiring, in a more complicated maneuver where they turned a voiding dummy year into a real year, pushed the void back in future years, and then used one on him and then on Rodney Hudson. So they didn't have a post U1 designation available. Now, to me, it's probably pretty clear after the draft you weren't going to be able to get anything satisfactory for DeAndre Hopkins or have a team work out some sort of new contract which is satisfactory. And they'd given Hopkins permission to talk to other teams during this whole process, supposedly. You could have just released him a month ago, right after the draft. Much easier process for Hopkins now that there isn't trade compensation involved. You don't have the same constraints for the cap. Now for Arizona, it's pretty clear. This is a reset year, and that happens with a new regime a lot. Team disappointing last year, won 4 games. Kyler Murray's out indefinitely because of torn ACL. You got tons of draft capital already in 2024, so maybe the need for additional draft capital wasn't as pressing. You've got the Texans' first round pick for next year, and the Texans are a team which are projected to be one of the worst teams in football. The Cardinals are projected by some to have the inside track the first overall pick next year. So it's conceivable they could have the first and second overall picks or 2 picks in the top 5, which would give them flexibility if they wanted to move up and try to get in a Caleb Williams sweepstakes, who, unless barring something happening, should be the first overall pick in 2024. Putting all that aside, Hopkins on an I Am Athlete podcast in the last few days with Brandon Marshall had indicated 5 quarterbacks he wanted to play with. Josh Allen of the Buffalo Bills, Jalen Hurts, Philadelphia Eagles, Patrick Mahomes, Kansas City Chiefs, Lamar Jackson, Baltimore Ravens, Justin Herbert, Los Angeles Chargers. One of the other things he said was he wanted stable management upstairs. Now, question for Hopkins is, what's going to be the most important thing to him? Is it money, trying to get fair market value for his services, or is he willing to be flexible because he wants to put himself in the best situation to win an ever-elusive Super Bowl ring? For his career, Hopkins has made $114,460,033 in career earnings. So he is financially in a position, based on what he's made from his football contracts, where he doesn't have to be driven by money. Now, that being said, most players still are going to be wanted to be fairly compensated. Now, this has not been the best wide receiver market this year. For the guys who were free agents or for the guys who were released. There has been one deal that was phenomenal and surprising. Odell Beckham Jr., who will turn 31 in the middle of the season, signed a 1-year deal for a fully guaranteed $15 million. Although he missed all of 2022 with a torn ACL. He tore his left ACL for the second time in Super Bowl 56. Didn't play at all last year. Fully guaranteed $15 million. $13.835 million to sign. $1.165 million as a base salary. $3 million in incentives. So the last time he went to a Pro Bowl, 2016. Last 1,000-yard season, 2019. So if I'm DeAndre Hopkins, I could understand why that deal would be very important for him. In terms of, this guy has not been that type of player in years. You got 2 knee injuries, and he gets that. The surprising thing about this deal, there are no per-game roster bonus. I figured, given that Beckham missed all of last year, had a previous ACL tear, any deal he had was going to have significant per-game roster bonuses, where the team gets to, if he isn't on the 53-man, 46-man, 48-man roster, I should say, if he isn't active for that particular game, then he doesn't get the amount of money. And I thought there'd be over $1 million. And it's a 17-game season. These are paid per game. I thought it might be $1.02 million in per game roster bonuses, $60,000 for each game he's active. So that'd be each game he wasn't active that he wouldn't get the $60,000. But that's not in this deal. Phenomenal job by Odell Beckham Jr. Now, you had Jacoby Myers Go to the Raiders, $33 million over 3 years, no incentives, $11 million per year, $16 million fully guaranteed, $21 million in overall guarantees. You have Alan Lazard, go from Green Bay to the Jets, $44 million over 4 years, $22 million fully guaranteed, basically the first 2 years, 4-year contract. Juju Smith-Schuster signs a deal averaging $8.5 million per year. It's a 3-year deal. To go from the Chiefs to the Patriots, that's 25.5 over the 3 years, $16 million fully guaranteed. He's got another $7.5 million in incentives to bring the max value to $33 million over 3 years. Vikings cut Adam Thielen, who's going to be 33 this season, and he goes to the Panthers on a 3-year, $25 million deal. There are no incentives. That averages $8,333,333 per year, $14 million fully guaranteed. And 2 more I want to highlight. Robert Woods was cut by the Titans, signs with the Texans, $15.25 million over 2 years, $10.5 million fully guaranteed. The deal averages $7.625 million per year. And an injury-plagued Michael Thomas, who's barely played the last 3 years, goes back to the Saints on a 1-year deal for $6.46 million, all guaranteed. There's another $5 million in incentives, so it's a 1-year deal that can max at $11.46 million. So that kind of gives you the lay of the land of the 2023 wide receiver market, with that Odell Beckham Jr. deal topping the market. Typically, a player wants to be made whole. Hopkins was supposed to make $19.45 million. Now, if someone wanted to pay him $19.45 million, they probably would have acquired him. Maybe they didn't want to give up the steep asking price that the Cardinals had, and there wasn't any flexibility. They really needed a day 2 pick, which had been a 2nd or 3rd round pick. Then between those two factors, there's no deal to be made.
Now listen up. I only have 30 seconds to tell you all about my first Netflix show, FUBAR, before this ad self-destructs. I play a spy who on his last day on the job discovers that, surprise, his daughter is also a spy. Can you imagine that? Together, we both go commando to terminate a very bad guy. So put that cookie down, get to the chopper, and come with me if you want to watch FUBAR, only on Netflix. This Netflix ad has been terminated.
So you open Google Chrome on your phone, you're hunting for a super rare first edition vinyl of a band you're obsessed with, when you're supposed to be working. But this site you tapped on seems pretty shady. And Daryl from IT just jumped up from his desk. Oh no, he's coming your way. It's a good thing built-in malware protection keeps you safe and sound. Not from Daryl though, sorry. There's no place like Chrome. Download Google Chrome on your phone.
Now let's go back and take a detailed look at the teams with the 5 quarterbacks that Hopkins would prefer. We'll start out with the Buffalo Bills. Now, the Buffalo Bills are very tight against the cap. The Bills only have $1,508,355 of cap space. Now, they've already restructured their biggest contracts. They can't get cap space from Josh Allen. They can't get cap space from Von Miller. They can't get cap space from Stephon Diggs, who has seemingly been unhappy since they lost in the divisional playoff round to the Cincinnati Bengals in January. Where they could get cap room would be Tre'Davious White or Deion Dawkins. Those are the next 2 biggest cap hits on the team. White, $16,237,857 cap hit. Deion Dawkins, $14,854,394 cap hit. Presumably Hopkins would be an upgrade over Gabe Davis as a number 2 receiver. That'd give them a nice trio of receivers. Davis is in a contract year. They also used their first-round pick on an offensive weapon, tight end Dalton Kincaid. Then you've got Kansas City. Kansas City, in terms of cap space, they're in the same ballpark as Buffalo, actually a little bit worse. They have $1,243,432 cap space. Now, this is a team where last year they didn't miss a beat without Tyreek Hill. Had a top 5 offense without Tyreek Hill and scored the most points. Patrick Mahomes said something pretty interesting last week before Hopkins was released, where he said thought they were pretty deep at receiver. They have Marquez Valdez-Scantling returning, Kadarius Toney, who they got from the Giants after he washed out there, former first-round pick. Sky Moore is going to be in his second year. Rashee Rice out of SMU was taken in the second round in this year's draft. Some people have been hyping up Toney like he could be the number 1 receiver. They got the most prolific tight end in the NFL, future first ballot Hall of Famer Travis Kelce. On this team, Hopkins should be the primary wide receiver. Primary target in the passing game is going to be Kelce. In Buffalo, you got Diggs there, so at best 1B. But early in Hopkins' career, he was paired up with Andre Johnson. Still had gas left in the tank before Hopkins overtook him as they continued to play together. Now, actually mentioned as a second quarterback was Hurts. Jalen Hurts, Philadelphia. Mahomes was third. Josh Allen was mentioned first. Now, cap room's not really an issue with the Eagles because the Eagles have $13,219,249 of cap space, and this would be such a Howie Roseman thing to do, the GM of the Eagles. Last year, he focused building up depth on the defensive line, going out and getting another offensive weapon or toy for Jalen Hurts. Be right up his alley. They're kind of weak as a third receiver. It's Quez or Watkins. They got Devonta Smith, who's the number 2 to A.J. Brown's number 1, who's making $25 million per year. So the type of targets that Hopkins would get would not be like they've been anyplace else. So I'm a little surprised to see that on his list. Number 4, he had the Baltimore Ravens. And they've got $12,007,012 of cap space. But that's not the bigger issue in Baltimore. In Baltimore, I suspect that Odell Beckham Jr. contract would be a big issue. That if I'm Hopkins, I don't want to play for less than Odell Beckham Jr. in the same place. Because I'm thinking better than he is. And Hopkins is Beckham's last Pro Bowl season, 2016. Last 1,000-yard season, 2019. Gets $15 million fully guaranteed signing. Phenomenal deal. No per-game roster bonuses. I thought since he's had a second ACL tear and missed all of last year, there'd be at least $1 million in per-game roster bonuses. By that, I mean that there'd be 60, like some amount. If it's $1 million, maybe it's 60,000 per game that he gets if he's on the 48-man active roster. And then if he's in street clothes or on IR, he doesn't get the money. So if he had 60,000 per game, that'd be $1.02 million in per game roster bonuses. That's what Juju Smith-Schuster had in Kansas City last year, $1.02 million in per game roster bonuses, and he missed the majority of the 2021 season, I think, with a shoulder injury. But phenomenal deal. He's also asked $3 million in incentives, and what is considered not likely to be earned for Beckham is totally different than what would be considered not likely to be earned for DeAndre Hopkins. Beckham did not play last year, so what you did in the prior year is considered likely. He did nothing, so everything's not likely. Nonetheless, the thresholds are easily achievable to a degree. The way I peg it, Beckham should make another 1.5 in incentives at a minimum, because he's got $250,000 for 30 or more receptions, or $500,000 for 40 or more receptions, or $750,000 for 50 or more receptions, or $1 million for 60 more receptions, or leading the team in receptions. He's got $250,000 for 250 more receiving yards, or $500,000 for 500 or more receiving yards, or $750,000 for 750 or more receiving yards, or $1 million for 1,000 more receiving yards or leading team in receiving yards. He also has $250,000 for 3 or more receiving touchdowns, or $500,000 for 5 or more receiving touchdowns, or $750,000 for 7 or more receiving touchdowns, or $1 million for 9 or more receiving touchdowns, or leads team in receiving. So I'm looking at it that he should get to 50 receptions. That's $750. At a minimum, he should get to 500 receiving yards. That's another $500,000, and should catch 3 touchdown passes. That's another $250. That's where the 1.5 comes from. So Beckham should be making $16.5 this year, worst case scenario, from Baltimore. And the way this deal was structured, he's only taking up $3.932 million on the cap, because his $13.865 million signing bonus is getting prorated over 5 years. It's not all counting in 2023. Because they added 4 voiding dummy years, 2024, 25, 26, and 27, all void. They're fake years, just for cap purposes. So if it's a 1-year deal, or they don't get a new deal in place before the void hits, Baltimore's going to have an $11.099 million cap charge. That'll be the dead money in 2024 if Beckham is one and done. And the last team on the list, out of his 5, was the Los Angeles Chargers, and they've got $13,206,661 dollars in cap space. Now, they do have 2 $20 million receivers on the team, but both of them have durability concerns, and they use first-round pick on Quentin Johnston, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams. So, luxury, not a necessity for the Chargers. Now, that's out of the, just looking at the 5 teams that he has the most interest in. And where Hopkins is going to make his most money is he's got to have multiple teams involved that are suitors. It can't just be the 2 which were the most interested in the trade that never happened, Bills and Chiefs. You get multiple suitors, you can play them off against each other, and that's how you're going to get your best deal. If you're only dealing with 1 or 2 teams, then you don't have a lot of leverage, and the money's not going to be what you're accustomed to. Now, the teams with the most cap room, you hope you can draw 1 or more of those teams in, but they're flaws with the teams that have cap room. Team with the most cap room is the Chicago Bears. They've got $33,044,902 of cap space. They traded with Carolina to get DJ Moore to be an upgrade at receiver. Last year they picked up Chase Claypool at the trading deadline. They have Darnell Mooney still around. They may not think they need DeAndre Hopkins, given they're not close. At least they don't appear to be close to being a winning team. Plus you got Justin Fields, who's still making strides as a quarterback. I don't necessarily know if that's Hopkins' first choice, but if they're going to show interest, he could use them to drive up a price to where he really wants to go. Carolina has the second most cap space. Bryce Young, first overall pick, as the quarterback. Probably not all that appealing, even though Hopkins is a South Carolina native. Would be close to home. They have $27,941,090 in cap space. Same issue exists with the team with the third most amount of cap space, the Indianapolis Colts. Either got Gardner Minshew or Anthony Richardson, who was taken in the first round, as your quarterback. $23,774,233 of cap space. Now, the team that has the 4th most cap space would be intriguing to me. You have the Detroit Lions, $23,584,745 in cap space. Now, Amon-Ra St. Brown was the leading receiver, 4th round pick out of fourth round pick in 2021. He's got some promise. That guy looks like he's legit, can be a number 1 receiver, or you could be 1A and 1B. Jameson Williams serving a suspension to start the season because of running afoul of the gambling policy. They brought back Marvin Jones from Jacksonville, but I'd have them on my radar screen because Detroit Lions seem to be the consensus pick to win a weekend NFC North. That would be a team I would have interest in. Jared Goff played very well last year. The much maligned Jared Goff had a very good season.
I've been looking for this all my life.
On June 30th,
Indiana Jones, a final triumph.
a legend will face his destiny.
A few times in my life I've seen things, and I've come to believe it's not what you believe, it's how hard you believe it.
His last adventure
Give him hell, Indiana Jones!
will be his greatest.
This is it.
Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Rated PG-13. May be inappropriate for children under 13. Only in theaters June 30th. Tickets on sale now.
Next two teams in terms of cap space, Houston Texans, been there, done that. That's where you were drafted. You played there before. C.J. Stroud, rookie quarterback, team which is not close to winning. They have $17,646,069 in cap space. And then Green Bay, who essentially has a rookie because Jordan Love hardly played. They have $17,207,499 of cap space. That would have made sense if you had Aaron Rodgers there, but with Jordan Love, no. Now, particularly with Kansas City and Buffalo, you don't even have enough cap room right now to get to a Beckham deal. And I don't know if Hopkins is going to be able to get that type of money, given that we're basically June when he's hitting the open market and the lack of suitors for the trade, although it was more complicated than signing a free agent. But neither one of these teams has $3.932 million in cap space. And his incentives are going to be different, but you're going to have to be creative to sign him. I don't know what the base salary would be. I'm assuming a Hopkins worst case scenario might be along the lines of a Julio Jones last year. And the reason I use Julio Jones is that he was coming off of a down injury plagued year in Tennessee when he was released. And he signed right before the start of training camp with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. 1-year deal for $6 million. Maxed out at 8 incentives. His thresholds were 50, 60, 70, and 80 catches, 600, 700, 800, 900 receiving yards. He also had $2 million coming from the Titans because he had a $2 million base salary guarantee. So it was 8 is what he was scheduled to make because the guarantee had no offset. The Tennessee couldn't get money back from the new deal in Tampa. He got to double dip. The one thing in this deal which Hopkins wouldn't want is there were $1.25 million in per game roster bonuses in this Julio Jones deal. So we're talking basically 1-year deal front side of $8 million. Or you kind of look at it that he's got to be worth more than Adam Thielen's $8,333,333 per year. So basically 8.5. Robert Woods is at 7.625. You got to think it's going to be north of that. With Hopkins, the incentives are different because last year Hopkins had 64 catches, 717 yards, 3 TDs. His play time was 45.97%. Anything which is below those thresholds is considered likely to be earned as a cap charge. Anything above on its own, there's going to be no cap charge during the season. It'll be taken care of in a year-end reconciliation where you look at likelies that weren't earned and not likelies that were, and then you either have a credit or debit on the cap. So those are the thresholds on their own. You can combine a lower threshold with a team qualifier or another statistical qualifier and do incentives that way. I'm assuming you're going to have to do something like that, particularly for one of these two teams since they're cap strapped. So one thing we know Hopkins wasn't on last year was the 53-man roster for the first game of the year, or IR, or PUP. He was suspended. So you could couple a lower statistical threshold with that as a qualifier, and that's considered not likely to be earned. So you could have 25 catches. Theoretically, you could have one catch. And if he's on the 50th-man roster, IR or PUP for the first week of the 2023 regular season, that's considered not likely, theoretically. Obviously, you think the threshold would be higher, somewhere between 1 and 65 catches, because 64, because 64 is the last of likely. The easiest threshold, the first threshold for not likely, should be on its own 65 catches and 718 yards for Hopkins. It may have to be majority of the money and incentives. I don't know how much will be these very easy ones to earn where he doesn't have to do a whole lot. But if DeAndre Hopkins is the Hopkins of old and not an old DeAndre Hopkins, he's going to do at least what he did last year. So that's how I kind of see this envisioning, particularly for Buffalo and Kansas City. Obviously, there are probably going to be incentives. You don't have to really go this low. You can't do a straight team offensive qualifier. Well, you could, but it wouldn't benefit Hopkins because they were so great offensively, these two teams. If they stunk up to joint, were ranked in the 20s in most statistical categories offensively, you'd use that as a team qualifier, but they weren't, so that doesn't make a whole lot of sense for him. There are a couple other teams that would intrigue me besides the 5 on his list and the ones that had cap space. If you want to be a New York Jet, I'd have Aaron Rodgers on speed dial because I'll say this partially in jest. Whatever the assistant GM Aaron Rodgers wants, the assistant GM Aaron Rodgers seems to be getting at this particular point in time. Now, if you had DeAndre Hopkins for Jet, and they've got Garrett Wilson, looks like he could be a star in the making. They signed Allen Lazard. It would probably be at Corey Davis's expense. He's in the last year of a contract of a $10.5 million base salary that's not guaranteed. So you pick up $10.5 million of cap space you could play with to sign Hopkins. If you didn't have Corey Davis on the team. So that's where the cap space would come from in this particular situation. Now, another team I wouldn't rule out is the New England Patriots. I know that there was the rift between Bill O'Brien and DeAndre Hopkins when he was in Houston. O'Brien is now the Patriots offensive coordinator. He was the head coach in Houston when he was traded to the Arizona Cardinals. Stranger things have happened. Bill Belichick always heaps a ton of praise on DeAndre Hopkins whenever they play him. They basically traded out Jacoby Myers for Juju Smith-Schuster, who signed for $8.5 million as a base. $11 million is a max on his deal. You'd have to pay him more, presumably, than Juju for New England. But Dallas, I could see kicking the tires on DeAndre Hopkins, although they went out and got Brandon Cooks in a trade. They've got Michael Gallup, who signed an $11.5 million per year deal. He should be better, another year removed from the torn ACL. And CeeDee Lamb is their clear-cut number one receiver. Dallas has $10.9 million in cap space, but they will be picking up cap space on June 2nd because they have Ezekiel Elliott, who was given a post-June 1 designation, and they're going to have his $10.9 million base salary come off the books, so they'd have the cap space to do it. Kevin Stefanski, the Cleveland head coach, said that they'll explore everything, but they're happy with their receivers. It's really Amari Cooper they got last year in a trade, who signed a $20 million per year deal, is their guy. And the quarterback and DeAndre Hopkins are close. He'd love to happen. Deshaun Watson, that was his go-to guy in Cleveland. Now, Cleveland, from a cap standpoint, doesn't have a lot of cap room today, but that's going to change. They've got 2 post-June 1 designations that are going to come off the books for them. So they're going to pick up cap room. They're going to pick up $1.165 million from Jadeveon Clowney, and John Johnson is another one. They're going to pick up $9.75 million from him as well. And their cap situation is, I think they got like a little over 6 of cap space, but as you can see, that is going to change dramatically for them. So they're going to be in a much different cap space in a couple of days. It's actually $6,158,683 of cap space that they have. But if I'm Hopkins, I need multiple teams involved so that I can play them off against each other and try to get the best deal I can. If not, he's going to be playing for probably significantly less than he was scheduled to make, the $19.45 million. You got to be creative with Kansas City and Buffalo if he's going to end up there. Well, that's going to be it for this week's Inside the Cap. Don't forget, you can find me on Twitter at Corey Joel, CORRYJOEL, and you can read a regular CBSSports.com column on Agent Stake. And thank you for listening, and we'll see you back here next time.